Hello, friends. I'm Emily Towns, Dean Emerita and faculty member of Vanderbilt Divinity School in the great city of Nashville, Tennessee, in the troubling state of Tennessee, and one of the co-chairs of this LGBTQ-RAN GALA. I also served on the initial board of RAN. I'm joining you from Martha's Vineyard tonight.
And welcome, radical resistors, because if you're tuned into this to celebrate radical resistance to religious homophobia, you too are a radical resistor. My name is Jim Matulski, and I'm coming to you from Belmont, California, where I am the pastor of the Congregational Church of the Peninsula, and I am proud to be a United Church of Christ, Metropolitan Community Church, and TFAM, Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, minister. All those connections are possible because of some of the people that we are honoring today at our gala. I'm proud to be a board member, a founding board member of LGBT-RAN. And one of the reasons why I am not just a board member, but a proud financial supporter, and I hope you will be too by the end of this broadcast if you're not, is that I love preserving our history, and I love that we continue to make history. So the people that we're honoring tonight are perfect examples of people who not only made it, but are still making it. And all of us together tonight, by being here at this gala, continue to make LGBTQ religious history. So I'm looking forward to whatever else unfolds tonight with this wonderful group at this queer family reunion.
Thanks, Jim. I'm intrigued with the gala theme of radical resistance. It speaks particularly to queer religious history, such as Saint Eugenia, who briefly lived her life as a male monk, Eugenios, joining a series of medieval Mediterranean saints who had been assigned female at birth, but became monks in all male monastic communities. In our contemporary era, we have Reverend Elder Troy Perry's founding of the Metropolitan Community Church in 1968, and the founding of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries by one of our honorees tonight, Bishop Yvette Flunder, in 2000. We're going to see some examples of all of this and more in tonight's program.
So let's get started. This is going to be a great evening, and it's already happening. Let's go.
I think that means it's my turn. Hello, RAN community. I am Dr. Joel Kushner, and 18 years ago, I founded an institute on LGBTQ plus issues in Judaism at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm also honored to be a member of the LGBTQ-RAN Board of Directors. I live in Los Angeles, but today I'm joining you from Boulder, Colorado, and I'm here to guide you through a lively 75-minute gala event. Depending when you joined, and I think we can put it in there again, you'll find a link for the order of the program in the chat box. So you can check that out. Now, while I've attended numerous gala events over the years, I have to say this is my first time hosting online. So, okay, I'll say it. I'm only dressed from the waist up, and I hope you are also very comfortable wherever you are signing in from. Let us know in the chat box. As a Zoom webinar, you won't be able to see or communicate directly with other participants or the presenters. However, your comments and questions are always welcome in the chat box. Just use the drop-down menu and decide if you're going to send it to everyone. There's 80 plus people last time I checked, or just the hosts and presenters. If you want to stay around afterwards, you'll have a chance to go into breakout rooms with some of the presenters, so then you can see and talk to them directly. Before we get started, we do want to acknowledge that there are many in deep pain about what is happening in Israel and Gaza. We can't fully acknowledge the horrors of what are going on in this space, but we do want to mention it and bear witness. We're choosing to do this with an intentional moment of silence, to be with those who are grieving, to pray for the hostages, We can also pray for peace in Israel, Gaza, Palestine, and also everywhere that this tragedy is being experienced. So if you will hold that moment of silence with me for a moment. Amen. Thank you. So in a cycle of life with pain and joy, we are taking this moment here tonight to honor and celebrate shining lights of radical resistance. To get us started, here is a quick overview of the wonders that the LGBTQ Religious Archive Network offers.
History is written from the perspective of those who preserve their records. LGBTQ+ religious movements have had and continue to have a profound impact upon the religious and social institutions in the United States and around the world. We want to be sure that historians of the future have the source material to tell our stories. The LGBTQ Religious Archives Network provides a rich treasury of information on queer religious history.
Our website now documents 600 biographical profiles across many religious and spiritual traditions. We've also recorded some unique oral histories of a diverse group of trailblazers. Without these recordings, their stories may have been lost forever.
And that's when I realized that my grandmother was afraid people will call her a freak. You know, when people don't conform to gender.
Our collections catalog identifies more than 400 primary source collections from or about LGBTQ+ religious and spiritual movements located in repositories around the world. Our innovative online exhibits are easily accessible for recreational and educational exploration.
LGBTQ-RAN runs several initiatives to support the scholarship and teaching of queer religious history. Our annual Virginia Rami Mollenkott Award honors outstanding scholarly papers in LGBTQ religious history, the only award for research and writing in this field. Our annual LGBTQ-RAN Educational Resource Prize encourages the development and sharing of classroom resources on queer religious history.
We continue to assist leaders of the LGBTQ+ religious movements in how best to preserve their own valuable records.
The LGBTQ Religious Archives Network aims to celebrate and share the rich history of the broad spectrum of LGBTQ spiritual and religious experience. Together, we can preserve our voices and stories for future generations.
Welcome, friends. I'm Marnie Warner, chair of the LGBTQ-RAN Board of Directors, speaking to you from Massachusetts. We're proud to be entrusted with the task of preserving the vast and rich history of the LGBTQ+ religious movements. Tonight, we're giving you a glimpse of that by honoring 6 outstanding leader activists, some from the past and some from the present. It's inspiring to be able to tell the stories of these people, their daring lives, their courage, and their bold accomplishments.
Hello, I'm Mark Bowman, LGBTQ-RAN Executive Director, joining you from my home in Chicago. Also tonight, we'll spotlight some of LGBTQ-RAN's primary activities, how we preserve voices and stories, but also enable research into and teaching of queer religious history. Our small but gifted personnel team is dedicated to fulfilling our unique mission to ensure our legacy. But we cannot do this alone. It can only happen with your participation and support. Thank you for joining us.
And now we finally have the privilege of recognizing our first honoree of the night. To do this, here is Bishop Vanessa Brown.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much. Bishop Yvette Flunder was born in San Francisco, California, and raised between the Bay Area and the Mississippi. She grew up in the Church of God in Christ, graduating from high school from the Kojic Saints Academy in Lexington, Mississippi, before returning to California. In 1984, she began singing and recording with Walter Hawkins and the Love Center Choir, where she led the notable songs, Thank You, Lord, and Special Gift. Other gospel music recordings include There Is Power with the City of Refuge Praise Ensemble, We Won't Be Silent Anymore with the Fellowship Mass Choir, and How Sweet the Sound with the Grammy Award-winning Chanticleer. From a young age, Bishop Flunder's life reflected her beliefs to treat people with value and equality. In 1986, Bishop Flunder was moved to minister to people with HIV and AIDS in response to the epidemic of the 1980s. She founded several not-for-profit enterprises in San Francisco Bay Area, providing services for people affected by HIV. She had the Hazard House, Ashley House, Walker House, and Restoration House through the Ark of Refuge, Inc., which later became the Y.A. Flunder Foundation. In 1991, she founded the City of Refuge under the United Church of Christ in order to unite a gospel ministry with a social ministry. She describes the City of Refuge United Church of Christ as an effort to create a spiritual community that will embrace our collective cultures, faith paths, gender expressions, and sexual affectional orientation, while simultaneously freeing us from oppressive theologies that subjugate women, denigrate the LGBT community, and disconnect us from justice issues locally and globally. The Transcendence Gospel Choir was a community choir affiliated with the City of Refuge and was the first all-transgender choir in the United States. Ordained a minister of the United Church of Christ and a graduate of the Ministry Studies and Master of Arts programs at Pacific School of Religion, Berkeley, California. She received a Doctor of Ministry degree from San Francisco Theological Seminary in San Anselmo, California. In June 2003, Bishop Flunder was consecrated presiding bishop of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. The Fellowship, a multi-denominational fellowship of 110 primarily African-American Christian leaders and laity representing 56 churches and faith-based organizations from all parts of the United States, Mexico, Africa, London, and Asia. It's indicative of why we demean First Nation people in terms of their spirituality, or Muslims in terms of theirs, or Indigenous Africans in terms of theirs. It's because we cannot see the bigness of God, she said. In December 2014, Bishop Flunder served as the keynote speaker for the White House observation of the 26th anniversary of World AIDS Day. She was also named the 2015 Spiritual Hero in the January edition of the Science of the Mind, produced by the Center for Spiritual Living. True to her call, she continues to be a prophetic and progressive Christian voice and leader in the movement of justice for all of God's children, from the streets of Oakland to the halls of national government and international shores. Bishop Flunder's proudest accomplishment includes her 3 decades of partnership in ministry and life with Mother Shirley A. Miller, also a renowned gospel music artist and mother of City of Refuge and the Fellowship of Affirming Ministry, and as a co-parent of 2 beautiful daughters and magnificent grandsons. Bishop Flunder is also the author of Where the Edge Gathers, Building a Community of Radical Inclusion. And Where the Edge Gathers, Bishop Flunder uses examples of persons most marginalized by church and society to illustrate the use of village ethics, knowing where the boundaries are when all things are exposed, and village theology, giving everyone a seat at the central meeting place or welcome table. She focuses on the following marginalized groups: same-sex couples, to convey the need to re-examine sexual and relational ethics; transgender persons, to illustrate the importance of radical inclusivity; and gay persons living with AIDS, to emphasize the need to destigmatize society's view of any group of people. The book, which combines both Bishop Flunder's personal experiences with the marginalized people and theological and pastoral literature on the topic, will appeal to denominational leaders and clergy who minister to the marginalized and the inner city. Bishop Flunder is active on many social media platforms, using her platforms to consistently advocate for Black lives, for queer lives, for medical accessibility and destigmatization of HIV-positive lives. Pentecost is about being empowered to get beyond the structures created by these silos and find our way to one another beyond race, beyond gender, beyond empire or nationality. It is about moving to a place where we can see the entire family of God as one family. It is my deep joy, pleasure, and honor to present this award to Bishop Yvette Adrian Flunder.
Well, thank you very much. I trust that you can hear me. I see you joyfully waving. This is excellent. God bless you. Thank you so much, Bishop Vanessa M. Brown. And to all of those who concluded that I should be a part of this gathering and are sharing with those, my brothers and sisters and siblings, who are also being lifted up. I know you and know so much about your work. I deeply appreciate it. I am currently encouraging everyone from some of the experiences that we are having right now all over our world and our country to reflect a lot on David and Goliath, and particularly David, because he loved both Bathsheba and Jonathan. I think it is important to lift it and say that Goliath thought he had it because it was big and because it was strong. But David knew he was called, and he ended the entire problem with one smooth stone. I'm saying to you now that this is our time, and God and the divine of our understanding is empowering us to come from the back to the front, to speak truth to power, and to evidence in our presence that we know who we are and we know whose we are. And I believe that if God is for us, and God is, who is possibly capable to be against us? God bless you, and thank you so very, very much. Blessings.
Wow. Blessings indeed. Thank you, Bishop Flunder. And it is so clear why we chose you for this award. Thank you. Give me just a moment. So I hope that many of you have had the chance to go to our website and see all that we do offer. But in case you haven't, let me just say that we provide vital resources to scholars, to students, and to that queer kid in Missouri who thinks that they can't be a person of faith because they don't see anyone around them like them. You're now going to hear from two students Jamie Meir and William Stell about their experience using LGBTQ+ RAN resources.
Hi, my name is Jamie Meir, and I'm a first-year graduate student in the History and Library Science dual degree program at the University of Maryland, College Park. I study United States social justice history and will hopefully pursue either the archival or museum studies tracks. I was introduced to the LGBTQ Religious Archives Network about 3 years ago from my undergraduate mentor. I was a gender and queer studies student in an interdisciplinary degree program that allowed me to heavily explore the intersections between LGBTQ+ identities and religious innovation. I have used LGBTQ-RAN's website and resources so much in my many capacities as a student, a teacher, and a researcher over the past 3 years. Most recently, I've used their extensive network of archival collections from around the world as a launching pad for my primary source-based lesson plan, which I built as a part of my LGBTQ-RAN summer internship. I've also used their profiles, biographies, and teaching materials in my United States history classrooms, and I've used their rich collection of oral histories in my research on the LGBTQ+ history of the DC area. What I've really appreciated about LGBTQ-RAN's resources are that they are diverse in the entry points that they allow you into this really rich and diverse and human history. And since all of the materials are tagged based on their relationships and connections to other leaders, organizations, movements, and traditions, you have your choice on how you want to enter the network. What I've learned most from my time as a beneficiary and a part of LGBTQ-RAN is that this project is so important because it can never be finished. Not only because there will always be more history to collect, but also because there will always be more history to create and preserve. And the folks at LGBTQ-RAN are tirelessly devoted to helping you do that. So thank you, LGBTQ-RAN, for all that you do to make this history accessible and available, and for making me a better historian.
My name is William Stell, and I teach American religions at New York University. But for the past 5 years, I was a PhD student at Princeton University in the Department of Religion and the program in Gender and Sexuality Studies. My dissertation was about evangelical gay activism in the 1970s and anti-gay evangelical backlash against it, and more broadly, about the need to better historicize anti-LGBTQ+ religious positions wherever they are found. At this point, I honestly do not remember when I first learned or how I first learned about LGBTQ-RAN. What I can tell you is that over the past 2 years of dissertation writing, I have probably returned to its website more than any other for my research. 2 of my 5 chapters use its oral histories extensively. I've returned to Virginia Mollencott's interview many times, and then the repository of MCC oral histories is just remarkable, is truly invaluable. It's not hard to find resources on the denomination's founder, Reverend Troy Perry. It is much harder to find an array of other voices that give you a fuller picture of this diverse, eclectic, sprawling denomination. And LGBTQ-RAN's collection does precisely that. My dissertation at this point, my first book, will be much better because of it. And I cannot thank the people behind LGBTQ-RAN enough.
Thank you, Jamie and William. So you may not know it, but some of the resources that you heard about that LGBTQ-RAN creates, we do it with a small but mighty staff. And to do that, to keep doing that, we need your help. Our GALA goal was $15,000. With the incredible help of partners and allies and sponsors, we are close to that. I'm going to push us in to see if we can bump that goal up by $1,800. For those of you who might not be familiar in Jewish tradition, Chi life, the numbers and the words connect. And so Jews like to give in multiples of 18, 36, double Chi, double life. So let's see if we can go above our goal. On the screen now is a QR code, giveq.org, which our communications director who's running all of this, Asati, put on the screen. And yes, this is the one time that someone is telling you to multitask on your phone while you're doing something else. It's okay. So please make a gift in honor of one of the celebrants, or maybe a heroic figure in your life who supported you in your queer journey. So I'm going to wait just a few seconds while you're doing that. I'm going on. Hopefully you've started that process. If not, wrap it up and wait till our next commercial break. So now, please welcome Jimmy Creech to introduce honoree Reverend Dr. Mel White.
From the 1960s until the early 1990s, Mel White was immersed in the evangelical movement as an accomplished pastor, seminary professor, filmmaker, and author of over 17 books, including autobiographies he ghost-wrote for Billy Graham, Jerry Falwell, and Pat Robertson. All during this time, he struggled with his sexual attraction to men, believing to be both a sickness and a sin. After desperately trying for years to change his orientation through counseling, shock therapy, and reparative therapy, with frequent thoughts of suicide, Mel finally accepted and affirmed his sexual orientation. "I am gay, I am proud, and God loves me without reservation," he would declare. Along with this freedom, Mel embraced a new calling, setting his queer sisters and brothers free from the toxic anti-gay rhetoric of Christian evangelicals and fundamentalists. My old clients on the religion right were misleading millions of Americans to fear and to hate gay and lesbian people, to discriminate and legislate against us, and motivating extremists and crazies to terrorize, abuse, and even kill us, Mel explained. On Christmas Eve in 1991, in what Mel describes as his first, quote, coming out letter, he wrote to Jerry Falwell telling him that his campaign of lies against gay and lesbian people was leading to suffering and death, and asking to meet with him. Falwell never replied. Mel also wrote to Billy Graham, Pat Robertson, James Kennedy, and James Dobson with the same request. None replied. In 1993, Mel was installed as the Dean of the Cathedral of Hope in Dallas. In this role, he took what he describes as, quote, my first baby steps toward becoming an effective gay Christian activist, when he was arrested in Washington, D.C., protesting Bill Clinton's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. Mel's autobiography, Stranger at the Gate, To Be Gay and Christian in America, was published in 1994 and brought Mel national recognition as a leader in the gay rights movement. In February of 1995, Mel was arrested for trespassing at Regent University when trying to meet with Pat Robertson. Refusing bail, Mel remained in jail and fasted until Robertson met with him in the middle of the night on the 21st day. Mel lost 20 pounds. Because of their meeting, however, Robertson publicly stated, quote, he despised violence against homosexuals. In 1998, Mel and his husband, Gary Nixon, founded Soul Force, based on the principles of nonviolent resistance, following the teachings and examples of Mohandas Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. New York Times headline, September 5, 1999. Falwell and allies to meet gay rights supporters. Quote, if all goes as agreed, the Reverend Mel White, an outspoken supporter of gay rights, will take 200 people to Lynchburg, Virginia next month to meet with the Reverend Jerry Falwell, an outspoken critic of homosexual activity, and 200 people Falwell has invited. Such an encounter will certainly be unusual, even perhaps first in the long contentious debate over gay rights. And so began the extraordinary Soul Force crusade to end spiritual violence against transgender, bisexual, gay, lesbian, and queer people because of misguided religious teachings, a crusade that continues to this day. In the first 7 years, Mel and Gary led thousands of Soul Force volunteers in 19 nonviolent direct actions at United Methodist, Southern Baptist, Presbyterian, Episcopal, Lutheran, and Roman Catholic national gatherings in cities all across the United States, as well as 2 visits to James Dobson's Focus on the Family and 2 visits to the Vatican in Rome. In each case, first calling on the respective church's leadership to meet for dialogue, And then when the invitation was ignored or denied, conducting nonviolent direct actions that most often resulted in the arrests of Soul Force volunteers. Soul Force launched its equality ride in 2005 with young adults traveling by bus to 18 Christian colleges and universities across the country, plus the U.S. Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, and West Point, challenging each to reconsider its policies that discriminate against lesbian and gay students. Mel stepped down as the executive director of Soul Force in 2006 and was named president of its board of directors. While continuing to help guide the mission and activities of Soul Force, he devoted his time to writing, publishing Religion Gone Bad, The Hidden Dangers of the Christian Right in 2007, Grace and Endymion, A Fable for Victims of Biblical Intolerance in 2014, and Clobber the Passages, 7 Deadly Verses in 2020. Mel's latest book, just recently published, is Storming the Gate, Fighting Religion-Based Oppression with Soul Force, a sequel to Stranger at the Gate. This year marks the 25th anniversary of Soul Force. The Reverend Alba Onofrio, the current executive director, describes Soul Force today as, quote, a thriving global community of holy troublemakers and spiritual resistors against the forces of spiritual violence and white Christian supremacy. Alba says, there is rarely a place I go where someone does not tell me how Mel saved their life. There are so many stories about lives saved and lives changed by Mel. We at Soul Force in 2023 feel so grateful for the courage, the integrity, and the perseverance with which Mel and Gary have lived their lives out loud and in public. We live daily into their legacy of addressing religion-based violence head on with steadfast dedication and spirits unyielding. We are the living legacy of 25 years of work to stop spiritual violence. Thank you, Mel, for the time, energy, bravery, and love. So now it is my pleasure to present this honor to Mel because he has been a witness to truth in love with relentless nonviolent resistance to the religious rights, spiritual violence against transgender, gay, bisexual, lesbian, and queer people. A witness to the truth that all are beloved by God without reservation. A witness that has saved lives. Because Mel is unable to be with us today, he pre-recorded his acceptance of this honor.
Hey, buddy. I'm glad to be here tonight. I'm crippled, I can't walk, and I barely can talk, but I'm delighted to be with your august group of people you're honoring tonight. You know, God honors people who go out and do the job. We don't need each other's praise. We just need to know we're doing what we should be doing. This is that book that will help inspire you to do that. Lots of funny stories, lots of illustrations. I hope you'll get this book. It's not going to make me rich, but it'll enrich your life, I'm sure, because God wants you to do justice with her, and this may help inspire you to do that.
Thank you. Words and deeds, that's what I'm hearing, words and deeds. There are many types of school settings, from high schools to seminaries to universities. We use our resources. And I want to note some of the many schools who have generously been supporting LGBT-RAN. Auburn Seminary, Bexley Seabury, Boston University School of Theology, Bright Divinity, CLGS, Chicago Theological Seminary. I didn't even know some of these places. Colgate, Rochester, Crozier, Drew Theological School, Eden Theological Seminary, Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary, Lancaster Theological Seminary, Moravian Seminary, Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago, United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities, Vanderbilt Divinity School, Wesley Theological Seminary, Yale Divinity, Methodist Theological School in Ohio, Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, my own institution. We want to truly thank you for your generous support of LGBTQ-RAN. Now we have a message from Reverend Justin Sabiatanis. Good to see you. About using LGBTQ-RAN materials in teaching.
The LGBTQ Religious Archives Network resources have been such a valuable contribution to my classroom. I'm Justin Sabiatanis. I'm on the faculty of United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities, where I teach a course in queer and trans theologies. There are three distinct ways in which LGBTQ-RAN's resources have been helpful in that course. First, the online exhibitions allow my students to explore primary sources in LGBTQ religious history at their own pace. Rather than just listening to a lecture or having history mediated through an instructor, they can see for themselves what people were writing, speaking, doing, in groups as diverse as the Council on Religion and the Homosexual, early LGBTQ synagogues, and even the Gay Atheist League. I assign, as part of the reading, Open Hands magazine, and I let the students pick which issue they want to read, so then they can select the topic that's of most interest to them and explore that in more depth. They then share that learning with other students in the class. Second, the oral histories make our conversations about LGBTQ religious history come alive. Again, my students can hear directly from people in their own voices. For example, Jade River talks about the challenges she found in finding other witches who are equally interested in exploring theology, delving into it. Well, it's much more interesting to share her recollections of that than for me to say that building community in the 70s and 80s was difficult. The diversity of people interviewed helps me present an inclusive and accurate view of our history. And the clear transcripts that are with each oral history allow students with different learning styles to participate. Some prefer to just listen, while others like to read along. All are more engaged in the topic. And finally, there's the profiles. The first year I taught this class, I gave a fairly standard assignment of writing about a biography of an early LGBTQ religious leader. And the essays were fine, but not especially inspired. So the next time I had students create profiles using the LGBTQ-RAN Profiles Gallery as the model. Mark was absolutely amazing. He volunteered to help students find a person who really suited their interest or came from a similar background, and the essays were great. Some of the students have stayed connected with the people that they interviewed, and we were able to submit a group of profiles. This year, we're leaning even more into this assignment to be able to be sure that we can send all of those profiles to LGBTQ-RAN. This assignment really helps students build connections with those who inspire them, and it makes LGBTQ history relevant and meaningful in the present day. It also lets students contribute to the field. They're not just recipients of information about LGBTQ religious history, but instead they become active participants in preserving this history. I am truly grateful to LGBTQ-RAN for the meticulous and respectful work that goes into creating all of these resources that benefit both my students and my teaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin, for bringing our resources to your students. They're not meant to just sit on the web. They're meant to be used. They're meant to be shared. And so we can remember and do this important work. So it is now that commercial break again. So you're going to have another moment to honor or memorialize, commemorate someone at giveq.org. Now, you may also start to notice that you've been hearing a lot of Reverend Doctors. So I had this idea for a drinking game. Now, I know we don't want to encourage drinking, so I have adapted it. Every time you hear someone say, Reverend Doctor, I want you to say a blessing and make a donation in honor of someone you value. I'm going to make one in honor of Reverend Dr. Rebecca Vogel, who I think is an LGBTQ hero who's recovering beautifully from a terrible accident. I'm also part of a board match. So the board of RAN is going to match up to $5,000. What people have contributed. So I hope that you are clicking on that donation. I know that we've had at least 10 people clicking on it because Mark has shared that with me. So please continue to do so. Who made a difference in your life? One of these honorees, someone else, make a gift in their name, please. And now it is my pleasure to welcome a dear colleague, Reverend Dr. Here you go again, Roland Stringfellow, to introduce a beloved treasure, honoree Barbara Satin.
I'm going to do you one better. Greetings from Detroit, Michigan. I'm the Reverend Dr. Roland Stringfellow, the senior pastor of Metropolitan Community Church of Detroit, and I'm also the managing director for the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies and Religion at the Pacific School of Religion. I am so glad to participate in this Faith Leaders Hall of Fame. Now, I know that's not what we're calling it, but let's be honest, that's exactly what this is. The recipient that I am here to give honor to is the fabulous Miss Barbara Satin. If you don't know her, where have you been? Because Barbara has been a tireless transgender rights activist from the forefront of local and national issues around faith and aging. Born in 1934 until 1952, Barbara lived as David, without words for his gender disquiet. Even after hearing about Christine Jurgens, she remained married and closeted while serving as a lay leader in the role in the Twin Cities Roman Catholic Diocese. After retiring from a successful business career at age 60, she came out as Barbara to her family, left the Catholic Church, and found joy and freedom in her transformation. She came to believe that her transgendered identity was not a cross from God for her to bear, but a blessing to be shared, God's intention for her from a mature destiny. From this fulsome sense of freedom, she joined many LGBT groups in the Twin Cities. She soon recognized that most LGBT groups had no idea what the T in LGBT embodied. Sharing her experience of transformation helped her heal transgender individuals and their families and LGBT organizations, as well as faith communities. She came to understand that when she shared her story, she carried out a ministry of presence. Her story helped many others find their freedom to be themselves. Her activism made her a leader in many initiatives. She was the first transgender person in the LGBT Spirit of the Lakes Church in Minneapolis, which strengthened its ties to the United Church of Christ. She helped her church build a 46-unit affordable rental LGBT senior housing project, now celebrating its 10th year. She joined the United Church Coalition for LGBT Concerns, now entitled the Opening and Affirming Coalition of the UCC, and became its leader. Became its leader, thus becoming the first trans member of the United Church of Christ Executive Council. And Barbara played a role in the church's 2003 decision to affirm the inclusion of transgender people in the full life of the ministry of the church. For 15 years until 2022, she served on the National LGBTQ Task Force as the Assistant Faith Work Director, where her responsibilities included working for the full inclusion of trans persons in communities of faith, and then later she became its director. These leadership positions led to invitations to serve with the White House with their initiatives. In 2015, she participated in a White House conversation about housing concerns for LGBTQ seniors and was appointed to the Conference on Aging. In 2016, she served on the Presidential Council of Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships. Among her many leadership roles, she has derived the most meaning from helping faith communities. She has spearheaded the creation of the Trans Seminarian Leadership Cohort in 2014, sponsored by the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies at the Pacific School of Religion, along with the Freedom Center of Social Justice. She helped numerous faith communities in multiple traditions to help individual trans persons. Sharing her story has freed innumerable trans persons to be themselves within their faith community. As the current political climate has allowed bigots to paint transgender individuals as public enemy number one, she stands firm in her ministry of presence, of being herself in all her visibility and talent. She sees the fear that young trans people experience as they face losing their freedom to be themselves. And while she and other trans elders remember the diminished, closeted lives they lived before the LGBTQ movement, Barbara continues to embody radical resistance as an activist, openly trans activist, sharing her presence. Now, I want to go off script a little bit, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention another key partner of Barbara's in the field of advocacy for LGBTQ older adults, and that is the life and the legacy of Amber Hollowball. We lost Amber today. She worked with SAGE nationally and was a firebrand for queer folks as they age. It was thanks to Barbara, Reverend Dr. Rebecca Vogel, there you go again, Reverend Doctor, and Amber Hollowball, who inspired me to bring affordable housing that is LGBTQ friendly here in the Detroit area. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Barbara Satin.
I want to thank the National LGBTQ Religious Archives Network for the distinctions they have brought to me and to other honorees this evening. My years of faith activism have centered around three main areas: cultivating trans acceptance within and outside the LGBT community, helping faith communities understand, welcome, and affirm to affirmation to LGBT folks, and finally supporting the old lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender folks, my peers, who have provided the broad shoulders on which we have built the movement we experience today, though not perfect, but so much more than most of us could ever have imagined. Activism as a transgender woman came as a surprise to me, but was planted, nourished, and challenged by many of the folks whose lives are chronicled in the profiles contained within the religious archives. Many of those even gathered virtually here tonight. While there are too many mentors and supporters to mention individually, I do want to remember the one who first cultivated my interest and commitment to LGBT old folks. And as Roland mentioned, that was Amber Hollowball. Amber Hollowball was a powerful voice for this oft overlooked population, and it raised their needs, expectations, concerns, and fears to the rest of the queer community, with the publication by the task force of her seminal work, Outing Age. Beautiful Amber passed away this past weekend, but her impact as a powerful writer, fierce political activist, and warrior for social justice will live and help shape the future for our communities. Many of you have heard the story about how my activism came about, but I want to share it again briefly because it is the heart of how my 3 decades of ministry took shape and flourished. Newly out as a trans person in the faith community, I was asked to come to the national gathering, the United Church of Christ LGBT Folks and Allies in Chicago in 1998. Since it was the denomination's first major session addressing the role of trans people in the church, I was asked to make my presentation dramatic. I decided to tell my transition story from its embryonic stage at age 6 to its then current state at age 64. I came on stage as David, my guy self, wearing a long black terry cloth robe, and in front of the large plenary audience began to relate my gender journey, its joys and its pains, while beginning to make up my face. At the end of my remarks, I reached for a wig I had placed behind me and dropped my long robe, unveiling the fabulous frock I was wearing, and introduced the audience to Barbara Satin. The response was overwhelming and so very positive. I still get heartening comments from folks who were there and heard about the presentation. But the real impact of the event came 6 months later at a Thanksgiving liturgy with other faith communities back in the Twin Cities. Before the service, a woman came up and asked to talk to me. Later, we met in private. She told me I had changed her life. Her father was a crossdresser, and she had broken off all connections because she didn't want something like that in her life. But then she saw my Chicago presentation and came to the realization that was my dad up there. She returned home, reconnected with her father, and renewed their relationship. I was truly moved by her testimony, but then realized all I had done was to tell my story. And that simple fact made me understand that my role as an activist was to be an out transgender presence in the world, in a world that doesn't understand who we are as God's beautiful creation. That has fueled for the past 25 years what has come to be known as my ministry of presence, to be visible and open trans person in places, both queer and straight, that need to know that we not only exist, but are vital, vibrant participants in their daily worlds. Today, the trans and gender nonconforming community, both young and old, are under attack. Gender ideology, whatever that means, is a catchphrase that radical politicians and clergy use to attack my community in ways that demean and provoke fear in the hearts of trans and gender nonconforming folks. Their targets are our most vulnerable, our children, our elders, as well as their families, friends, and allies. A few years ago, my dear friend and former task force associate, Rodney McKenzie Jr., made a heartbreaking rallying call from the plenary stage of Creating Change Conference. He proclaimed, "Our silence is killing us." I agree. Whether we are LGBT or Q, we need to tell our stories to a world that doesn't understand or want to know about our lives, our hopes, our aspirations, our fears and concerns. Speak out. Speak out. And remember, community members who have been victims of violence because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. On November 20th, a month from now, communities across the country will come together to memorialize the trans folks who have been killed because they have lived their authentic lives. 19 individuals, mostly young trans women of color. Keep these individuals in your thoughts and in your hearts. And remember, speak out. Speak out. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, and everyone tonight. How inspiring, moving, and life transforming to hear the stories of these stalwart history makers among us. If you're inspired by these stories, remember that you can see and read many, many more on the LGBTQ-RAN website. I'm here now to give a shout out to the sponsors of tonight's gala. We are incredibly grateful for the outpouring of support from 40 groups and schools. LGBTQ-RAN is a tiny organization with a gigantic mission, so we cannot do this alone. We depend upon the collaboration of many activists, archivists, students, teachers, and volunteers to preserve and proclaim our history. Thanks to the support of these generous sponsors, this gala is a financial success. Remember, you can do your small part with a gift to LGBTQ-RAN at giveq.org. You can give online at giveq.org. We look forward to continued partnerships and collaborations with these groups and schools in our future endeavors. And now, returning to tonight's honorees, we will hear from the Reverend Neil Thomas introducing Rabbi Denise Eger.
I have had the great honor and distinction of knowing our next honoree for more than 20 years. When I first arrived in Los Angeles to become the senior pastor of Founders Metropolitan Community Church in 2001, Reverend Elder Dr. Troy D. Perry picked me up at my office and said, "There is someone you have to meet, and I have a feeling that you're going to be good friends." He was right, and Rabbi Denise Eger and I quickly became good friends, colleagues, and good troublemakers ever since. Rabbi Denise is a well-deserving recipient of the LGBTQ Religious Archives Network's first ever GALA Awards as both an activist in the work of queer inclusion and a trailblazer, making a way within Judaism for LGBTQ+ rabbis, cantors, and other spiritual leaders to be in ministry. Let me tell you just a few things about this incredible woman of faith. Rabbi Denise Eger knew from a young age that she was called to serve in religious community. Her first inclination was she would be a cantor, and if you've heard her singing voice, this would come as no surprise. However, in college, she made a decision that she would follow her call as a rabbi who sings. Her family were observant in a Reform Judaism tradition and went to synagogue regularly and observed all of the Jewish holy days. She, in fact, was a Jewish youth leader. Heading to seminary seemed a logical step, but being a lesbian was a problem. In those years, you could not be openly gay and a rabbi. In fact, you could be kicked out of seminary. Rabbi Denise helped create an underground gay and lesbian support group at seminary and worked behind the scenes for acceptance of LGBTQ+ folks to be in seminary openly. This work has always been a feature of her life and ministry. The Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion finally in 1990, along with CCAR, changed its policy. In advance of the convention where this would be debated, she made her coming out a public act when she was first featured in the Los Angeles Times. It was 1993, in the height of the AIDS crisis. She had just left the synagogue where she had served as a rabbi for 5 years, and along with 35 people, they started Congregation Kolami to be a different kind of synagogue, a place of welcome for queer people and their families and allies. Congregation Kolami have been locally and globally recognized for their work and have received numerous awards for the congregation. But Rabbi Denise is not just a spiritual leader or a proponent for LGBTQ+ inclusion or a feminist paving the way for women in the Reform Judaism movement. She is a prophet in the real sense of the word. She is the author and contributing writer to many books, journals, articles, and has influenced religious thought. Her book, Where Pride Dwells, a collection of LGBTQ+ prayers, poems, and liturgy, are a celebration of Jewish diversity. She was also named one of the leading religious figures leading the fight for LGBTQ+ equality by the Human Rights Commission. Rabbi Eger understands that to make systemic change, you can't just do so from the outside, but from within. She became the first woman and gay person to lead the multi-denominational Board of Rabbis of Southern California, and in doing so, she broke the glass ceiling. However, as in everything, she excelled, holding this position concurrently while also president of the Reformed Regional Rabbis for the Pacific Area Reformed, which stretched from Vancouver to El Paso. She has long been an activist for women's equality, queer equality, and helped campaign and change the rules for ordination of LGBTQ+ people and clergy working within the Reformed Rabbinate to work for and endorse marriage equality. These things, and many, many more, brought her further acclamation, and in 2015, Rabbi Denise Eger was elected the first openly gay person to be president of all the Reformed rabbis worldwide, with more than 2,500 rabbis of the Central Conference of American Rabbis. She became one of only 3 women to hold this position, and in its 170-year history, she was the first openly gay person. More personally again, I've had the honor to serve alongside Rabbi Denise in numerous capacities, including leading several interreligious missions to Israel and Palestine, founding California Faith for Equality, and led the religious community during the Prop 8 debates in California, and co-authoring a book together that was published this year, 7 Principles for Living Bravely, Timeless Wisdom from 2 Faith Traditions. Rabbi Denise Eger, you are a personal hero, and I am proud to introduce you, and congratulations on this well-deserved recognition and award.
Thank you, Reverend Neil. Always an honor to be with you and to share time with you, my co-author and treasured friend, and you are my pastor always. Thank you to Mark Bowman and Joel Kushner and the board and everyone at the LGBTQ Religious Archives Network for this great honor and this celebration tonight of radical resistance. First, I want to shout out Mazel Tov to my fellow honorees, particularly my very good friends, Reverend Mel White and Bishop Yvette Flunder. We've done a lot of work and we've done a lot of radical resistance together through many years. I feel so honored to be celebrated for my contributions to our queer community. Radical resistance is something that we need to continue in these days and times, as our equality is never over. Being a religious person, a spiritual person in the queer community is an act of radical resistance, because so many of our queer people, our children, our family and friends have seen the terror that religion can cause. And so the work that I've done through the years has really been to try and help heal that trauma, and to allow people to bring their sexuality and their spirituality together, as well as the battle for our civil rights and our equality. I hope those of you watching tonight will continue that challenge, as I will now. I'm grateful for my family, for my wife, Rabbi Eleanor Steinman, and her leadership, and I'm grateful for the friendship of many of you. And my friend, a shout out to Jim Matulski, Reverend Jim, who's one of the co-chairs of this evening. So again, thank you for this great honor. And I'm glad to support the work of the Religious Archives Network. We need to know our history, and that too is a radical resistance. Thank you.
This event is just filling me up, and I can imagine for many of you as well. Thank you, Reverend Neil, good friend and colleague, and those times on California Faith for Equality, where we were all making holy trouble, was pretty sacred for me. So, taking a breath. We now turn our thoughts to those loved ones in our movement that we've lost in the past year and a half. And as you heard earlier, to those names, we will add Amber Hollabaugh. We're now going to see a slideshow of some of those friends.
In memoriam, we speak the names of those who have transitioned. Reverend Jane Heckles, Larry Sanner, Logan Foster Willis, Reverend Jan Griesinger, Reverend Bonnie Daniel, Jim Pilarski, Reverend Dr. Sandra Robinson, Reverend Jennifer Hall, Pax Niedorf, David J. Bachman, Joanne Campbell Jones, Roy Dahl, Dan Leatherman, Ruth Winger, Most Reverend Frank T. Griswold, Adam DeBow, Reverend Dan Smith, Reverend Dr. G. Welton Gaddy, Reverend Dr. Stephen Peters, David Knopp, Reverend Dr. Melvin Talbert, Herschel Siegel. We give thanks for the courageous witness of all of those who have gone before us.
We have not included someone you want to remember. Please add their name now in the chat section. The names we've shared and the names in your hearts. In the Jewish tradition, we say, may their names be as a blessing. Amen. In this ongoing cycle of elder to youth transmission of our sacred task, movement work continues as we look at two who are making history today. Please welcome Reverend Dr. Stephen Cady, who I'm told throws a mean yo-yo, and he will introduce honoree Reverend J.J. Warren, followed by actor, activist, and scholar Peterson Toscano, who will introduce honoree J. Mase III.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be with you this evening, and I do not have my yo-yo with me, or else I would demonstrate for you what I'm able to do. So it is truly my honor to introduce J.J. Warren. J.J. Warren is a preacher, prophet, pastor, scholar, advocate, activist, public theologian, and a good friend. Growing up in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, JJ found his faith in a small United Methodist church in Penn Yan and nourished it through active roles, first as a youth and then as a young adult within the Upper New York Annual Conference. He was a youth representative, a camp counselor, and eventually a delegate to jurisdictional and then general conference, the highest legislative body in the United Methodist Church. At Sarah Lawrence College, he not only discovered a queer-affirming community in which he thrived, but the stirrings of a call to ministry. So much so, in fact, that other students, many of whom had been harmed by the church, affectionately referred to JJ as the pastor guy and sought him out for counsel, prayer, or guidance. He spent his junior year studying at Oxford University, completing much of the historical and linguistic research that would lead to his brilliant book, Reclaiming Church, A Call to Action for Religious Rejects. The world got to know JJ, however, when in his signature pink blazer, he stood at the microphone at the special called session of the General Conference of the United Methodist Church, the very session in which so-called traditionalists baptized their bigotry, and with passion and grace spoke truth to power. Overnight, people realized that they needed to hear what JJ had to say, and he has not stopped speaking. Even when he was denied a place in the ordination process in his home conference, even when others have tried to silence his voice, even when he had to figure out how to fund his own way when everyone else was covered, JJ has not stopped speaking. JJ completed his Master's of Divinity at the School of the Prophets, Boston University, and is currently working on a PhD in Advanced Theological Studies at the University of Vienna. He is the executive director of Young Prophets Collective, a nonprofit that seeks to equip and empower a global community of young LGBTQIA+ religious leaders and allies who use their voices for liberation. And while all of that is worthy of praise, I remember that JJ, the pastor, preacher, prophet, the fierce advocate for radical resistance, was also the camp counselor who sang my kids to sleep when they got a little homesick. In other words, what makes JJ unique, what makes his message so powerful, is that his heart is as big as his voice. Thanks be to God.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Stephen, and good evening, everyone. My name is JJ Warren, and it is a true privilege to be recognized and to be with you virtually tonight as part of the LGBTQ Religious Archives Network. I want to extend my deepest thanks to Mark Bowman and the entire team here at LGBTQ-RAN for all of your energy and effort in preserving the history, our shared history together as queer and trans folks in the religious movement for liberation. Thank you for all that you do. I know that I stand and we all stand on the shoulders of giants, of the queer and trans foreparents before us who created the path when there was none in sight. And it is a true honor to be standing on their shoulders and working with each of you wherever you are around the world so that we would move the needle towards justice just a little bit further in each of our own lifetimes. I am so grateful to work with so many folks in so many different places as we work together to co-create the kingdom of God, a realm of justice and equity for all. And I am so honored to be here amidst the other honorees tonight, to be recognized among this wonderful crowd of saints for the work that together we are all doing. And I want to thank you for all that you do wherever you are to amplify the voices of queer and trans folks in your area. So I am truly grateful to be in this moment, this messy and holy and mystic moment with each of you, and to be here as part of LGBTQ Religious Archives Network with you this evening. Thank you, and I hope to see you in person one day soon.
Sisters, brothers, and others, when we talk about groundbreaking activists who challenge norms and inspire change, J. Mase III stands tall. J. Mase III is more than a poet. He's a lifeline for Black, queer, and trans communities. His activism doesn't merely nudge boundaries, it shatters them with eloquence and unwavering conviction. I first witnessed his impact when he took part in the Soul Force equality rides over 15 years ago. Here was a group of young adults boldly venturing into territories that weren't exactly welcoming of LGBTQ+ dialogues. In fact, they were downright hostile. He didn't just attend these events, he infused them with passion, confronting policies and provoking critical conversations that bridged gaps of understanding. In a landscape often resistant to change, J. Mase III stood as a beacon, using his voice and presence to advocate for a more inclusive vision of faith. In a world that muffles marginalized voices, J. Mase III has consistently been a clarion call, echoing the hopes and dreams of many. Through his words and actions on stage, through publications and workshops, on TikTok and YouTube, he's educated, inspired, provoked, and even injected lots of important humor into his prophetic work. J. Mase III is the author of several books, including And Then I Got Fired, One Trans Queer's Reflections on Grief, Unemployment, and Inappropriate Jokes, as well as White Folks Be Trippin', an ethnography through poetry and prose. He is a head writer for the theatrical production Black Boys, winner of a Lambda Literary Award for Transgender Nonfiction and a Creative Capital Award. J. Mase III is the co-director of the forthcoming documentary, The Black Trans Prayer Book, and is finishing his solo work, Is Your God a Violent God? Finding a Theology of Survivors. In J. Mase III's powerful performance poem, Josephine, he masterfully weaves the tale of Joseph from Genesis into a modern narrative, challenging traditional interpretations and asserting the presence of queer identities throughout biblical history. This poem not only confronts the biases held by some religious interpreters, but it also stands as a testament to the resilience and magnificence of the queer community, both in ancient times and today. And this poem is now available in graphic novel form in the book Josephine, A Trans Story of Biblical Proportions. I will put a link in the chat. So as we gear up to honor a comrade who's not just made waves, but entire tides of change, let me introduce someone who's been a collaborator, a co-conspirator, a pioneer, and the prophetic heartbeat of a movement, the incomparable J. Mase III.
Peterson, thank you so much for that. Of course, cannot see Peterson's face without also acknowledging that for me, Peterson, Thomas Toscano, was one of the first people in my life through being able to watch some of his plays, was the first person to introduce me to a liberation theology that included intentionally naming trans people's stories. So much of liberation theology merely mentions the existence of trans people, but doesn't actually get down to the nitty-gritty of who we are and our stories. And so I want to thank you, Peterson. I want to thank the LGBTQ Religious Archives Network for this high honor and for being among all these foundational leaders. I want to thank my colleague and forever collaborator and friend, priestess, Lady Dame Figueroa Didi, who's my co-editor and co-director with the Black Trans Prayer Book, Audrey Burr, Deja Baptiste, and the whole crew at the Black Trans Prayer Book, Chris Page and Reverend Lewis Mitchell at Trans Faith, and the late and great Charlene Arcilla, who was the first trans person I saw speaking from a pulpit. We went from about 20 anti-trans bills introduced in 2019 in the US to over 500 anti-trans bills being introduced in 2023 alone. And y'all, I'm not a mathematician because I failed that, so don't ask me for no math tips, but I did the math, and that is an increase of over 2,000%, right? Much of this legislation and the ever-increasing anti-trans violence colored by trans misogynoir and trans antagonism that we are experiencing is unquestionably anchored in violent theologies of white supremacy and Christian nationalism. So many people who wish to do our communities harm have mainstreamed their religious ideologies and frameworks. I believe that we deserve theologies of care, of resistance, of survival, and that are more abundant, more honest, and more fleshed out than their theologies of destruction. It is not ever enough to say a welcome to trans people alone, but that we understand that the level of organized harm manifesting right now in this world demands we explicitly name, research, and uplift the specificities of who Black, Brown, and Indigenous trans people are. When I say who we are, I say who we are as those who are able to call ourselves into being in a world that tells us we shouldn't even exist. Who knows more about the spirit than Black, brown, and indigenous trans people who are told a name for our bodies and say no, who are given names that don't fit and say no, who capture the resistance against white supremacy by being more genders than the English language can hold. Thank you for honoring my small contributions to the legacy of spiritual workers as a Muslim, Christian, multi-faith Black trans person who found myself in prophets like Josephine, goddesses like Inanna, Orisha like Yemaya, and medicine peoples like Victoria, who was an enslaved African trans femme stolen from the land of Benin in the 1500s that declared herself better than her captors ever could. I am but one of many, and this legacy is still building and weaving beyond me. From here to my trans and queer loved ones in Palestine, thank you all so much for having me.
Jim, I don't know about you, but it is taking me a bit. And I see Joel's coming on. So let me stop talking and let Joel talk, and then I'll start talking after Joel.
No, I think you were the one who's on. I was going to do a little patter in the interstitial spaces, but it's all for you, Reverend Emily. Reverend Dr. Emily Towns, and I'll just say thank you to those people who have made a gift. There have been many, and our incredible executive director, Mark Bowman, has been thanking people in the chat. If you have not, please do. It means so much. And now to our incredible co-chairs, which I'm very grateful for both of you. Take it away.
Thanks, Joel. Jim, I don't know about you, but I was in awe through parts of our gala tonight, and the thing that really came through for me over and over and over again is the kind of fierce faithfulness that our honorees have and continue to demonstrate over the years. It's quite a model that it's just awe-inspiring.
I agree. I mean, I was as moved by the things that I heard about and from people that I've known for many years as I was by the new things I have learned from hearing about people who are new to me. And I've never felt such excitement that the movement that we've been moving forward for so many generations now is going to continue. We are not going to see setbacks. We are not going to allow ourselves to be set back with the young leaders that we saw and the continued inspiration we have from the elder honorees. I think we're all in good hands. So I'm just grateful for this radical resistance revival that I feel I've just been to.
Very much a revival. And it brings home to me once again that it takes all of us together, working together. It may be a particular voice that calls us to action and helps light the way, but you need a cloud of witnesses in today's world to continue to shake loose the kinds of powers and principalities that we see far too operative in today's world. And so after tonight, I'm committing to double down on being ornery, Black, womanist, and a lesbian. And when I get good time, to be loud about it and unapologetic.
It was a pleasure to co-chair Resistance Revival with you, Emily. And also just to say that you yourself have been an inspiration personally to me, and I know to many others. So I know others will ask you to do this before we stop, but I'm asking everyone, make a financial pledge to support the work of this organization. It's supported by a large base of small and faithful donors. So be one of them. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marnie again from the board. And what I want to tell you from the board is that we are very grateful for the outpouring of support. Last record was 16 gifts for over $1,700. I want to take Joel up on his challenge I want 91 more dollars so we make 1,800 at least tonight. So somebody please give $91 so we can make our $1,800 goal. What I want to say from the board is that we are very careful with the finances and we use your money very wisely. And so these gifts, they really mean a lot. We do not have a large budget, but what you give really helps us do our mission and the mission that you all want us to be doing. But we also want you to be part of this mission. We'd like you to collaborate with us if you can think of ways of having us preserve our history together. So if you have ideas, send them to Mark or just to the email on the website, on our website, because we'd like to partner with you in the future if that's possible. Okay, I know not everyone's going to be able to stay, but I want to thank everybody for attending and consider attending our other webinars that are coming up. And we just can't thank you enough for your financial support.